Imagine creating something so iconic that it becomes a city's identity. Imagine creating architecture that can capture the imagination of millions of people around the world. IM Pei was one of the most famous and celebrated architects of his time. But this road to stardom wasn't always easy. His journey takes him through personal loss, through a war, through compromises, and through a whole city turning against him. This is a story of passion, a story of mistakes, a story of exceptional highs, and a story of disasters. This is the story of IM Pei. M Pei was born in 1917 in a very affluent family. His father was a wealthy banker and his mother was an artist. He had 5 siblings, but Pei was closest to his mother, and she was the reason he gravitated towards the arts from a very young age. When he was 10, his family moved to Shanghai, and it was here that the seeds of design were first sown. From the Bund waterfront to the Park Hotel to various beautiful gardens the city had to offer, Pei developed an interest in how the built environment could affect and enamor a person. Now, although this city gave him so much in terms of art and culture, it also took something away. Soon after the move to Shanghai, Pei's mother developed cancer. He spent a lot of time with her while she was battling this disease, and she died shortly after his 13th birthday. Her loss affected him profoundly. Pei at the time never had a close relationship with his father, and after their mother died, his father sent all the children to live with extended family. But even though she was gone, the impact his mother had on him was something he carried with him all his life. After he finished high school, he decided to get a higher education, and he chose to pursue it in a place that was very popular during the youngsters at that time: the land of opportunities. Pei applied to universities around the world and he was easily accepted. He decided on the University of Pennsylvania. This was partly because UPenn offered one of the best programs in architecture, but it was also because Pei wanted to live the American life. When he was young, he started watching a lot of Hollywood movies. In his own words, college life in the US seemed to be mostly fun and games. So in 1935, he got on a boat and left. UPenn at the time, just like many institutes around the world, was teaching the Beaux-Arts style of architecture. This was a style that draws from French neoclassicism, incorporating elements of Renaissance and Baroque. Pei was not interested in this. Also, after choosing his major is when he realized, as many students all over the world still do, that architecture involves a lot of drafting work. His peers at the time were far better than him at this, and he often felt intimidated. So he decided to leave UPenn and joined MIT. Now Pei excelled in his education at this new college. One day while going through the bookshelves in the library, he came across 3 books by a Swiss-French architect. They talked about how this new industrial age called for a rebirth of architecture, one that was based on function and the pursuit of raw form. The author of these books was of course the famous and the controversial Le Corbusier. Pei was mesmerized by his ideas and he found the kind of architecture he wanted to pursue. As luck would have it, Corbusier visited MIT while Pei studied there. So finally, Pei had found his calling within architecture. His final thesis was titled Standardized Propaganda Units for Wartime and Peacetime China. It's a very interesting read and it's freely available on the MIT website. Now while studying architecture, Pei also came across the woman he would spend the rest of his life with, and her name was Eileen Lu. Eileen, who studied art at the Wellesley College, met Pei when he was visiting New York. And I don't know if it was love at first sight, but it was something that lasted an entire lifetime. He graduated in 1940, and just 2 years after that, he and Eileen got married. Both of them together joined the master's program at Harvard University. But then, less than a month after joining, Pei was recruited to help the US win World War II. The World War II was in full swing when Pei had graduated. Just a year prior, the Japanese had bombed the Pearl Harbor, and the US was now completely involved in this war. In 1942, Pei joined the National Defense Research Committee, which coordinated scientific research into US weapons technology. You might wonder, why was an architect enlisted for research in the military? Well, as one member of the committee had once told him, if you know how to build, you should also know how to destroy. Pei during that time worked on an incendiary bomb. Since Japanese cities used a lot of wood and paper, the destruction through nuclear bombs would not be as great. So a new type of bomb called the incendiary bomb was studied. They are popularly known as fire bombs. They are used to destroy structures or to cause burn or respiratory injuries to people. Pei spent 2.5 years of his life on this research. Ultimately though, we know what US went with to win this war. And that changed the world forever. Now, winning this war, it kicked off a brand new age for the United States. The post-war boom saw the American economy grow significantly, and the people there invested heavily on infrastructure. Pei, finishing his work with the committee, came back to Harvard and graduated in 1946, and this post-war boom got him his first work opportunity. He was recruited to join Webb and Knapp, a real estate development firm. It was here that Pei got to work on and design projects like the Roosevelt Field Shopping Mall, Denver's Courthouse Square, and the Louvre Plaza in Washington, D.C. A lot of people who know Pei's later work say that his potential as a designer did not really flourish at this company because it majorly worked on real estate projects. But I would argue that this was one of the most significant parts of his career. His boss, William Zeckendorf, was a very well-connected man. So slowly, Pei was not just gaining experience, he was making connections that helped him rise to the level he did later in life. And he was learning the art of management and business, something which a lot of architects still today lack. Pei designed and constructed a number of projects and did such good work that he developed his own team within the office. This new team created some fantastic designs, and they even redesigned Zeckendorf's own office. And in 1955, after almost a decade of experience, Pei finally took the step to open his own firm, and his team followed. Thus was born IM Pei and Associates. Now, even though he practiced in the modernist era, Pei wasn't really a modernist. In fact, he never just adhered to one design style. And so actually when you glance through his projects, you see them all being quite different from each other. Whether it's the Sunroom Pavilion at the JFK Airport, the Green Earth Sciences Building at MIT, or the JFK Memorial Library. Each of his projects were unique and specifically created for that site. One such project was the Mesa Lab in Colorado. The project rested in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains, and the setting was such a huge part of how it was designed. In fact, the design of this project took him back to his childhood, back to the roots of his journey, to his mother. I recall the places I had seen with my mother when I was a little boy. The mountaintop Buddhist retreats. There in the Colorado mountains, I tried to listen to the silence again, just as my mother had taught me. And his design reflected this experience. Overlooking the Golden Valley, this building was in fact designed as a miniature neighborhood, arranged as a series of blocks set out in two clusters. The concrete is also tinted pink to pick up on the hues of the sandstone cliff surroundings. The project was an instant success as soon as it was revealed to the world. Pei even referred to this one as his breakout project, and it led him to getting many more commissions. However, there were some problems with the design. Leaks in the roof caused difficulties for researchers, and the shifting of clay soil beneath the building caused cracks which were expensive to repair. Now, the journey of IM Pei is actually filled with projects like these. Some were brilliantly executed and adored by the public, while others were actually considered huge failures. His career graph is marked one after another by these highs and lows. For example, the Dallas City Hall, a project that took 11 whole years to build, was loved by the city. But the Providence Central Plaza he made was declared a downright failure. The JFK Presidential Library was considered a masterpiece, but the Fragrant Hills Hotel in China was declared a huge letdown. One of the biggest blunders by his firm was probably the John Hancock Tower. The architect in charge here was Henry Cobb, but he was part of Pei's team. The tower built in Boston was covered in large reflective glass, but during a 1937 windstorm, a lot of these glass panels started to crack and fall onto the ground. The whole building had to be reglazed with smaller glass panels, and the client, architect, and the glass manufacturer all got into lawsuits.
It was quite humiliating. Humiliating when people sort of look at you, and architects particularly, very, very sympathetic, That's compassion, but that's not what you need at that time.
It was a huge scandal, one that tarnished the reputation of the firm.
And during that period, it was a very difficult period for our firm. That was the period where we built no big office buildings for big American corporations.
It got so bad for a while that all partners worked on projects outside the US. Now all this had a huge effect and impact on Pei. He was a man who was dedicated to his profession. In fact, saying that he loved what he did would be a huge understatement. When he was creating the Kips Bay Tower, he would inspect bags of cement to check for consistency of color. When the JFK library dragged on for too long, it deeply affected him, and his wife even mentioned that she could see he wasn't alright. The biggest story out of these is probably from the Fragrant Hills project in China, where the construction was turning out to be glacially slow. There was reportedly even a meeting where Pei screamed and pounded on the table. Even when the opening was closer, Pei reportedly himself started scrubbing floors with his wife and ordered children to make beds and vacuum floors. He got so invested and involved in his project that it took an emotional and physical strain on the Pei family. And even then, this project was termed a failure. Things like this affected him, but maybe all of this, everything that he went through till now, was in preparation for what's to come, because he was about to take on a project that would come to define his entire career, a project that would see an entire city hating his guts. In 1981, France got a new president, François Mitterrand, and he came to power with a variety of ambitious plans. He wanted to invest heavily in construction and infrastructure projects, and one of these projects was to renovate the famous Louvre. Pei was invited to head this project, and he became the first foreign architect to work on the Louvre. But maybe that was the root of the problem. Now Pei laid out a very ambitious plan. His proposal, which was as much urban planning as it was architecture, emptied portions of the palace which were formerly occupied by the government agencies. He proposed a new entrance to this museum, one which could link all three wings of the structure. Under the ground, he wanted to build additional floors for research, storage, and maintenance purposes. But the most controversial part of this plan was a glass and steel pyramid that housed this new entrance. Once these plans were released to the public, Pei saw a backlash for his work that he had never seen before. Initially, it was the administrator of the museum itself who was so against the design that he resigned from his post. And then came the people.
I think it's time in the middle of this sacred courtyard. It's a nonsense and a nothings.
One critic called it a gigantic, ruinous gadget. Another charged the president with despotism for inflicting Paris with this atrocity. Pei himself estimated that 90% of Parisians opposed his design.
It's a media that I had to deal with at that time, and I was totally unprepared, and my French language is just not adequate for that purpose. But I had to deal with the media to try to convince the French that this was the right thing to do.
The anger was understandably directed towards the fact that it was a non-French architect chosen for such a historically French site. What worked in Pei's favor was that he had the support of the people at the top. And then a solution for this came from the mayor of the Paris at the time. He said that the people needed to understand the design and its scale. So on his suggestion, Pei placed a full-sized cable model of the pyramid in the courtyard. They then held an exhibition there for 4 days, and an estimated 60,000 people visited the site. People could finally see what the architect intended and what the scale of it would be. And some hearts started to turn. The design went ahead, and it wouldn't be a Pei project if it didn't pose construction challenges. But the Louvre opened its brand new doors to the public in 1988, and the people loved it. Prince Charles of Britain surveyed the new site with curiosity and declared it marvelous, very exciting. I mean, Prince Charles, the man who actively spoke out against modern architecture, was now a supporter. The project was not just accepted, it actually started competing with the Eiffel Tower to become the symbol for Paris. And it wasn't just the iconic form of the pyramid. Pei's solution actually eased a lot of the problems that the Louvre had and really opened up the museum to people, increasing its capacity many-fold. This was a huge win for Pei. He once said after the Louvre, "I thought no project would be too difficult." It became his most famous design. He was being hailed around the world. In fact, the year the Louvre opened, Pei had 4 more projects that were inaugurated, and all of them were received quite well, making one critic call 1989 as the year of Pei. The man was 72 years old at the time and was at an all-time high in his career. And that is when he decided to take a step back. Now, as you grow older, you have to come to terms with your abilities limiting over time. Managing a huge architecture firm which employed 300 people was not an easy task. So Pei decided to take a step back. He now took up a very small team, focusing on just a few commissions. Now, during this time, the writer Christopher Turner once referred to Pei as the last surviving modernist. I don't know if I completely agree with it. If I were to ascribe a design style to Pei, I would call it challengist. A design style that would guarantee challenges for the architect, the construction crew, and for the client. I kid, of course, or maybe not, but Pei continued to create newer projects and newer problems. And he often worked in such mysterious ways. I mean, when taking up the Morton H. Meyerson Symphony Center, he himself did not know what will be the outcome of his design. He famously said, "I can imagine only 60% of the space in this building. The rest will be as surprising to me as to anyone else." The project, of course, went ahead, was over budget, and almost out of sponsors. But when it was built, it immediately got praises from all over the world. Pei never lost sight of the need to respect local cultures and traditions. He tried to understand every site and every context before picking up that pencil. He always wanted to go deeper into understanding the project, the client, and the purpose of every building. I mean, famously for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, Pei traveled to various rock concerts around America. And for the Museum of Islamic Arts, he commenced a tour of great Islamic architecture around the world. Sometimes he only took up projects because of how limited his understanding of the subject was, or how difficult they would actually be to design or to construct. He knew he would figure out a way, and whether it was well received or not, he knew it would be an interesting journey. Now, honestly, people have got around to recognizing the genius of most of his projects. Even the John Hancock Tower, which was dubbed a disaster, started getting recognized for its design. In the year 1983, he won the Pritzker Prize, considered to be one of the highest honors in the field of architecture. Each recipient of the prize gets $100,000. Pei used this money to establish a scholarship fund for Chinese students to study architecture in the United States, with just one added clause, that they return to China after their studies and help build the country he once called his home, something that he was never able to do. In his final years, he also chose to spend more of his time with his family. In 2003, he lost his eldest son after a prolonged illness. In 2014, he lost his wife Eileen. They by then had been married for 72 years. But even during this loss, Pei was not alone. He had his children and his grandchildren and great-grandchildren. He had lived a full life. And even though in a very limited capacity, he was doing the thing he loved most: design. On April 26, 2017, Pei celebrated his 100th birthday. There was a huge party at the Rainbow Room atop Rockefeller Center. He was surrounded by friends and by family. In fact, his birthday cake was designed in the shape of one of his final projects, the Museum of Islamic Art. 2 years later, a few days after his 102nd birthday, Pei finally passed away.
To me, it's just architecture. There's no such thing as modern architecture, postmodern, deconstructivist. You can use all the ism you want. I don't believe in any of them. They come and they go. And the one that really survived, lasting, is architecture. Architecture of that time.
Todo iluminado por el sol. Una ventana de ilusión. Niños jugando y las flores brotando, y en ese instante parece todo